Gonna set my heart at ease. Gonna make a sentimental journey to renew old memories. Got my bag, I got my reservation. Spent each time I could afford. Like a child in wild.
Hi, welcome to Call to Serve. I'm your host, Kathleen Corey Rami. Today's special guest is John Katsaros, United States Army Air Force, World War II, flight engineer, aerial gunner, photographer, recipient of POW, Purple Heart, Air Medal with Cluster, Bronze Star, 2 Presidential Unit Citations, the European, African, Middle Eastern Campaign, World War II Victory Medals, British Flying Boot, French Resistance, and Caterpillar Awards. And if that weren't enough, he's also a published author. Welcome to Call to Serve.
Thank you very much, Kathleen.
Thank you, John. I wanted to start out at your early beginning. Could you tell me, were you enlisted or did you get drafted?
I enlisted.
Did you? Now, you were with the 401 Bomb Group. Tell me more.
Well, actually, when I enlisted in the U.S. Navy Air Cadet program.
Okay.
And after passing all the tests and being sworn into the Navy Cadet program, they sent us home until they were going to be a call-up. And when they called us back a couple of months later, they came out with a new test called the Ishihara test.
Okay.
That was a color perception test, not a color-blind test, but a color perception test. And there was 10 of us in the group. 7 of us failed, and they discharged us immediately. We were so angry we joined the U.S. Air Force the next day.
Well, weren't they lucky to have you?
Thank you.
And your dates of service were?
I started with the U.S. Air Force on December 7th, 1942. That was a year after Pearl Harbor.
Wow, very good. And now I wanted to ask you, where did you train?
My training for basic was at, it was down in Miami Beach, Florida. For gunnery, aerial gunnery took place in Fort Myers, Florida at the Buckingham Air Base.
Right.
And then I went to engineering school in Seymour Johnson Field in Goldsboro, North Carolina.
Right. Now, you've brought a great picture of your crew from the B-17, and I'm so glad that you did that. Service was no stranger to your family. You had brothers that served as well?
I have 3 brothers that served. One was the former principal of Haverhill High School. He was a colonel in the U.S. Air Force. I had my brother Chuck, who was also in the Air Force, a sergeant, and a brother George, who was a sergeant in the Army.
Wow, well, we honor you and your family for
Thank
service to this country. You are a combat veteran, sir, and again, we honor you. And I wanted to ask you to invoke for me and for the audience that you were with the 401 Bomb Group. Help me, 6th, 12th Squadron, the 94th Wing, the 1st Division in the mighty 8th Air Force.
That's correct. That's
wow,
correct.
How about that? Is that a mouthful?
Well, you asked me to tell you where we got our training, but our originally training as a combat crew was in Pyote, Texas.
Oh.
And that's where I met the crew that you have a picture of.
Wonderful.
And that was our first phase. The second phase was at Delhart, Texas. And we were supposed to have a third phase, but due to the many planes that were getting shot down in 1942, they rushed us up, and the third phase was taking place actually in Deanthorpe, England, when we joined the 401st Bomb Group.
Okay, wow, thank you so much. Now, how many missions did you go on?
I went on 11 missions, and you were supposed to fly 25 missions when they sent you home. We were lucky if we got 5 to 8 missions. I happened to get shot down on the 11th mission to Frankfurt, Germany.
So many people were on borrowed time as they increased their exposure.
That's correct.
It's terrible. Now, you flew out of England.
Deanthorpe, England.
Deanthorpe, England. Tell us a little bit about the B-17. Now, they were originally designed for short missions. Is that what you were telling me?
No, the B-17, we were trained for short missions.
Okay.
In the States.
Okay.
However, when we got into England, they decided it's about time we started hitting Germany rather than France, and all our missions became anywhere from 9 to 12 hours.
Wow. Wow. Fuel must have been a deep concern.
Well, we knew that there was a big problem with the oxygen and fuel situation,
Right.
Especially flying on oxygen for many, many hours.
Yes.
And it was very critical at times trying to make it back to base.
Right. Well, you have so many great stories. We did do a little bit of talking before we sat down here today, and I did have to take apart some of the stories because there's so many. But would you please share with our audience that story about the tail and Charlie Purple Heart Corner?
Well, that was about my 8th mission, and it was a couple of days before that. We'd flown to Berlin, and I had 2 missions in 3 days, and I wasn't supposed to fly. And we went out and had a big party that night, and came back feeling fairly good. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm awake, and they say I'm going to fly as a replacement gunner, photographer, engineer with a new crew that had a sick gunner. And I said, no, I've already flown 2 days out of 3, and I'm not supposed to fly. No, you're on. So that day is the first time I met with a pilot, first time I met with this crew. And the mission was to Berlin, Germany, and we had a bomb a ball bearing factory. That was a long mission for a new pilot. And worst of all was when they put him in tail-head Charlie Purple Heart Corner. That was the last plane in the formation.
Okay.
And that's the first plane that the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, would go after and easily shoot it down because it had no protection.
Oh my.
Because as you see the B-17s, we would fly a B-17 in a very close formation. You could almost touch one wing with the other. If I looked out of my waist window, I could see the other waist gunner, and I'd be waving at him. What happened is that this pilot flying this first mission was afraid to get close to the other planes in front, so he kept lagging behind, and I'd call him up and say, gunner to pilot, this is, you got to get that plane in closer, we're getting over the French-English channel, and it won't be long, we'll be meeting some opposition. Right. So he'd pull it in, and a minute later, he'd pull it back out again. So I told him 3 times that he's got to get it in. The 3rd time I told him, I said, I could see the German planes taking off at the air bases. They're going to be up here in a minute. You better get that plane in there. He turned around and he says, Sergeant, if you don't keep quiet, I'm going to have you court-martial when we get back. So I said, God damn it, pilot, get that ass in there or I'll come and fly that plane for you. And with that, within seconds after that happened, we were attacked.
Oh my.
And the whole plane was shattered with 50 caliber machine guns and cannons, and you could actually look out of the waist window and see openings. And you never saw a pilot get so close to the other planes. You just saw it right after that.
That was the good lesson, well learned.
Yeah,
wow.
and we went all the way to Berlin and back again, and when we landed, I went on my hands and knees and thanked the Lord for the help he gave me. And the pilot came up to me and he tapped me on the shoulder. He says, Sergeant, I apologize for what I said. I said, think nothing of it, Lieutenant. Today you became a combat pilot.
My, what a story. You see why I couldn't not have you share that one. But we're going to talk about your most memorable experience, and I want you to take us, and take your time, please. Take us to March 20th, 1944, and tell us about that day on your 11th mission.
March 20th, 1944 was a very, very bad day. When we took off over Deanthorpe and got up into high elevation, it was you could barely see the next plane next to you. And we were having all kinds of trouble with the formation, and 2 planes collapsed. They hit each other, and it blew up right over the airbase, killing 20 airmen. Oh. At that point, we thought they were going to recall the mission because it was getting worse as we climbed higher. We finally got up to 30,000 feet and we were skimming a cold front. And we did this all the way into Germany. And when we got into Germany, about 10 minutes from the target, we called it the IP, the initial point of attack. We would hit a certain point and then veer towards a target. And the Germans would not know where the target would be. It could be any one of 3 places.